Let's call this meeting of the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District to order, please. And let's see, our agenda is slightly different today. If we could please rise for the pledge. And Mr. Sikich, at home, would you please lead us? Okay.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Susan, can we do the roll, please? And do we need to do the oath of office first before we do roll?
Right.
Do the oath of office first? Thank you to our special guest, Mayor Fine, for taking care of our oath of office for our three newly elected board members.
Thank you. Hello.
I'd like to just briefly congratulate the three winners of the election, two returning members and one new members. Welcome. And I also want to just quickly take a moment to thank outgoing member Dan Bailey for his service to the community for many years. Appreciate that service as well. We are going to start with Brian Keller. This is going to be my first virtual oath, probably yours too. So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Brian Keller,
Having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, we will do Kristen Kaiser. Try standing?
Sure.
Oh, the mic picks us up. Okay. Make sure the camera goes good. I state your name.
I, Kristen Kaiser,
Having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but I've not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will protect the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And no. I state your name.
I know Lee.
Having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
Having been elected to the office of West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor Devine.
Thank you. I'm gonna
Service.
remute this microphone, and thank you all. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you over the years.
Definitely, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, we'll then move on to the roll call, please.
Stay safe.
Mr. Eustruck,
Here.
Mr. Keller,
Here.
Mr. Schultz. Mr. Schultz is present, I believe.
Yeah, he's muted. Gary, you're muted.
Mr. Sikich,
Okay, I couldn't hear.
I can't hear her calling roll.
Yeah, I couldn't either, Jeff.
Oh, you're muted.
Barely.
Okay,
try
hold
again.
on.
And now, Stephanie, you're echoing again.
have to unmute yours so you can talk into it.
Mr. Sikich,
Present.
Mr. Lee,
Here.
Ms. Kaiser. Here. Ms. Klug.
Here.
Mrs. Justin.
Here.
And President Emmons.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Does anyone have any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
I have nothing.
Any board members? Okay. We'll then move on to item 6, public comments for this evening. I think there was a question out there, if anyone on the meeting wanted to make a public comment, just if you do, you will need to unmute. Please state your name and address for our record, and please note you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not engage or reply during this meeting, but a response will be provided before the next scheduled board meeting. Are there any public comments at this time? Okay, we will move on to item 7, the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. We'll start with 7.1, the legislative update. So a couple things at the state level, GOP lawsuit against stay-at-home extension. So GOP leaders asked the state Supreme Court to block an extension of the governor's stay-at-home order. The lawsuit was expected after Evers' health secretary, Andrea Palm, last week ordered non-essential businesses to remain closed until May 26, 2020. The state Supreme Court announced that Department of Health Services officials have until 4 p.m. on April 28, 2020 to file a response to the legislature's petition and motions. We'll be watching that carefully tomorrow afternoon and evening. And then the WIAA cancels spring competitions and tournaments, but extends spring sports opportunities. The Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association Board of Patrol voted to cancel 2020 spring sports regular season competitions and the tournament series while allowing individual virtual spring sports coaching to continue until the final day of the 2020 season. The board also voted to extend the unrestricted summertime coaching contact opportunities for spring sports only. Our athletic director team is investigating this decision in relation to our programs, area schools, and conferences. And I'll add that both of our conferences, the Woodland and the Greater Metro, because our high schools are in 2 different conferences, all of the ADs in those 2 conferences voted unanimously not to offer any competition. So it's still a kind of internal conversation of whether or not we'll engage in practice with student athletes that are in spring sports. And one of the pieces we're investigating is just, are there any risks from a liability perspective before we make any decisions? So we're investigating that with our liability provider. So I'll go on to 7.2 on the recognitions for the month of April. And we're going to start with a sad note, deeply saddened, all of us, to inform you that Ms. Stotza, our innovation coach, passed away unexpectedly on Thursday, April 16th, 2020 at age 55. Mrs. Stotza has been in our district for 17 years. She worked at several elementary schools in our gifted, talented, and creative program before becoming an innovation coach at West Milwaukee Intermediate School. Mrs. Stotza helped organize grants and headed up special events designed to expose learners to innovations in science, including a visit to the Millipore Sigma Curiosity Cube this past summer. Mrs. Stotza also served on many committees, most notably a recent revision of the strategic plan. Jenny was an extremely talented educator and a caring friend to all. We're privileged to know her, and we know we're going to miss her enthusiasm and her influence in our district for a long time. At Lane Intermediate School, congratulations to Mrs. Knau and her efforts in starting the FBLA Club at Lane. It's Future Business Leaders of America. Lane Intermediate was recognized as having the 3rd largest middle school membership count in the state. Also, Laura Luna, a student at Lane, was recognized as well. Laura was the president of Lane's FBLA Club, and due to her volunteer hours and the work she led, Laura was recognized as a phenomenal leader by FBLA of Wisconsin. And we want to also recognize and appreciate Dan Bailey. It is with deep thanks and appreciation that we thank Dan Bailey for his service to the Board of Education in the West Allis West Milwaukee School District. Dan served on the West Allis West Milwaukee Board of Education for the past 9 years. Mr. Bailey will be invited to our next Board of Education meeting for public recognition and thanks. And then we also want to do a shout out really for all the folks that are helping provide meals to families. And before I go through the list of names, if there's any members of the public listening, these meals are available to any families with children. You don't have to be enrolled in our school district. You don't even have to live in our school district. All you have to do is be a family with a child that needs food. And families do not have to have been qualified for your reduced lunch. Again, the only criteria is family with children that needs food. And so we want to thank Ann Costello and Amy Williams and Kathy Klein for serving meals via food truck at Morgan Grove, Irving, and Madison. So that food truck moves to 3 different locations each day. Jill Lorber and Ramona Kaiser for serving meals at Horace Mann Elementary School. Leslie Softkerp and Becky Cole. Kamal Sethi and Joanne Meitner for serving meals at Jefferson Elementary School. Gail Leroy and Jacina Ladizma for serving meals at Pershing Elementary School. William Phillip and Amy Eastham for serving meals at James Dotke. And Jean Morford and Jennifer Narazio for serving meals at Nathan Hill High School. And also special thanks to Steve Cosner and the meal preparation team of Deborah Rosewich, Diane Ducharme, Jane Banach, Deneen Gertier, Sharon Hudson, Stacy Kling, Colleen Samza, Don Nardi, and the Sodexo drivers Mike Groff, Jason McCloskey, and Terry McCloskey. And these are all for us, essential workers, and they're essential to families as well. So a big thank you to them for their service. And then I'll go on to 7.3, which is just a couple quick updates from me. We'll hosting a virtual teacher appreciation week next week, May 4th through the 8th with our PTA. And traditionally, this week has, PTA sponsoring lunches and different activities and little gifts in schools, and it's just far too hard to coordinate all of that. But I want to really thank Beth Kaler for coordinating with the PTA. And so this will be fun, especially for the younger kids. So on Monday of that week, it goes from May 4th to May 8th, we're asking kids to send their teachers virtual flowers by drawing pictures of flowers or taking a picture of flowers and sending that in an email or putting it up in one of their Zoom meetings. On Tuesday, to send a little video of a happy dance for your teacher. On Wednesday, wear your teacher's favorite color. So, on Monday, you may need to ask what your teacher's favorite color is. And then on Thursday, a note or a poem to the teacher about what you appreciate. And then on Friday, draw a picture of how you see your teacher and send that to your teacher as a way to thank them for all the work they do. And then we are also in end of year planning, and this is as kind of detailed as our beginning of learning from home. And this will include the return of devices and also opportunities for family to claim belongings that have been left in lockers and desks and cubbies. And we're designing a system that will share and communicate soon, but we want to make sure we've got this all worked out. It involves every single school, and we have to bring in a number of employees, so we want to make sure we have all of the proper protective equipment and proper social distancing. So there's quite a bit of planning going into this, but families can expect to hear about that soon. And then on Monday, May 4th, so next week, Monday, the board will be working with Drew Howick. Drew Howick is a consultant that works with many boards in the state on board development. And so that'll be a special meeting next week just to work on the work of board and relationships with the board and the administration. So I just wanted the public to be aware of that. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Beth
Bethany's trying to get your attention.
Oh,
She's muted.
Beth, you're muted.
I just wanted to say that Mrs. Daphne Lee is responsible for helping so very much with virtual staff appreciation. Just wonderful to work with her.
Thanks, Beth.
All right, we will go on to item 8, the board president's report, taking a look at the board calendar. So today, April 27th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and congratulations to our newly elected board members taking your oath of office today. Immediately following, we do have 2 workshops, secondary grading discussion and proposed 2020-2021 budget and preliminary tax levy number 1. Don't know if it's so far. And immediately following a closed session meeting. As Marty discussed, next Monday, May 4th, starting at 6 o'clock, we will be doing a board workshop with Drew Howick. That will be a remote-only meeting so that we can all focus independently. May 11th at 6 p.m. is a regular Board of Education meeting, and Monday, May 18th at 6 o'clock is a regular Board of Education meeting. Immediately following is a workshop on the 2018-2019 audit. Do any board members have any updates?
Not really an update, but just 2 things I'd like to say. First, I'd like to congratulate Noah and Brian to be back on the board, and congratulate newly elected Kristen. Look forward to working with you. And then on that sad note that Marty mentioned, I'd like to extend my sympathy to Jennifer Stotts' family. I taught with her in her early years in the district, and what a great educator, and above that, just a super, super person. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other board updates? Okay. We'll then move on to the consent agenda for the evening. There are 4 items. Item 9.1, the approval of minutes from the April 13th, 2020 regular Board of Education meeting. Item 9.2, the employment summary. Item 9.3, the supplementary contracts. And item 9.4, the financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated?
Move to approve.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you all very much.
Okay,
All right, we will then move on to our action items for this evening. Item 10. Oh, I'm sorry, Marty, go ahead. I apologize.
I take a moment here. We have Josiah Fladell, who is, thank you to the board, was just approved as the new principal at Lane, and we'd like to welcome him. Josiah, you're muted right now, so unmute your microphone. And it's an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the board and talk a little bit about, why you're excited to join us in the work in West Allis, West Milwaukee.
Well, good evening. I just want to start off by saying thank you to the board and to the team at West Allis, West Milwaukee. Through the hiring process, it's been exceptional getting to know you and working with you. Who I am as a person, I want to start off first by introducing my family. It's going to take a little bit here, but my wife is here, and my 19-month-old son Caleb is also here. So if you hear him in the background, that's what's going on.
Wonderful.
That means he's cheering for you.
So, this is Caleb and my wife Tanya, and the other big news is our second child is due on September 30th. So
Congratulations.
a young but growing family.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. So that's who I am personally. Professionally, I've worked at the high school level as a regular education teacher, a special education teacher, and an alternative education teacher. I've also worked in program support in the area of special education, providing leadership in special ed to a large urban high school. And I currently serve as the Dean of Students at Sheboygan South High School. So that's kind of my background professionally, educationally. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology from UW-Milwaukee. I have a master's of arts in teaching from Cardinal Stritch, a master's of educational leadership. And as of yesterday, I am now a second-year doctoral candidate in the special education program at Cardinal Stritch. I'm excited, like I touched on before, the conversations, the people that make up West Allis, West Milwaukee School District have been an absolute joy to work with. It's kind of refreshing as an educator to have a team that aligns with me as far as constantly wanting to grow, constantly wanting to improve, constantly wanting to provide better opportunities for our children. And that's what I've experienced so far with the West Allis, West Milwaukee team, and I'm eager to get to work.
Thank you, Josiah, and welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome. Looking forward to working with you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the action. I apologize, I jumped the gun a little bit. Item 10.1, our high school international travel to Europe date change.
Yeah, so this is an item I'll turn it over to April Ellery, who's joined us, just to talk us through it. But given everything else, there's lots of adjusting we're doing, and this is another one of those moments. So April, if you could kind of explain this to the board, how this plays out.
Sure. Hopefully this is one of the less complicated adjustments that we've had to make. ACIS is the company that I travel with, and they have obviously suspended all international travel. Right now it's through June, but they are predicting July, August, maybe September. And what they're doing, what they're offering is just to roll the trip over. So we were supposed to travel in July, leaving July 8th of 2020. And now instead, we're looking to just roll the trip into 2021, traveling July, possibly July of 2021.
So the question that comes up is, what happens for current seniors that maybe would not be available to travel in 2021 that were anticipating traveling this July?
So with that, then they would work with the company to get whatever refund they are allotted through the insurance that they took out on the trip, if they choose not to travel in 2021.
They would still be eligible to travel?
Absolutely, if they've signed up for the trip. Yeah, if they've signed up for the trip, they can come back and travel.
Cool.
Most kids have already paid, like, because down payment was due shortly before we left for school, and so almost everyone had paid between $4,000 and $4,300 to travel on the trip. We have fundraised for 2 years to pay for the trip, and everything was paid for, and we were just gonna kind of slide into the July date, and then everything blew up. So we don't even really need to raise any more money because everyone has raised their money.
Would this now be open to other people because we're a year later?
Yeah, if I did have students who were able to come up with the money and wanted to add on to the trip, that would be okay with me if there were students that wanted to do that.
Any questions on the change?
To approve?
We look for a motion? Well, I think I heard a motion as I was talking. Was there a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Congratulations. Hopefully everything works out for this next trip.
Gosh, I hope so too. Thank you so much. Yes.
All right, move on to item 10.2, the authority for administrators to issue final non-renewal notices to teachers. Mr. Thompson.
Yep, so good evening, everyone. And just following protocol, just here to ask the board for approval to issue final non-renewal notices to those teachers before the May 15th date.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions?
This was based off of, not the normal reduction in force policy, just want to establish that.
Jeff? Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
That question was directed to you.
I didn't hear it.
Question at all.
I didn't hear it.
You're muted.
Which microphone should I say?
Not the microphone, your computer.
So I just wanted to confirm this is non-renewals. We're not doing the normal reduction in force policy this year as we discussed previously.
Correct. So through retirements, we're hoping that that meets the number of teachers that might have to move. But it's not the normal process that we used last year.
Okay,
Thank you.
We've had a motion and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you. All right, move on to item 10.3, the approval of CISA 1 contract for 2020-2021.
So I'll turn this over to Deidre, but this is an annual item, just like the one before it, this time of year. You know, we participate in CISA and contract for certain services that we're not able to provide ourselves. And so Deidre, you can take it from there.
Good evening, everyone. So the CISA contract we brought once before, and then this has a revision, and we hadn't historically always brought that contract back when it does have a revision, but this had a pretty specific line item number in it for audiology services, which again is something that we purchased from CISA One, as we don't have enough of that to hire an individual to be an audiologist within our school district. So that everybody is aware, the contract does sometimes flux with CISA during the year. So if we buy additional seats at Project Success for some reason via an IEP decision throughout the year, then the contract dollar amount would go up. And then if we, for some reason, somebody graduates or then we don't need the seats that we have at Project Success or Turning Point, then the contract goes down. So it has a couple of points during the school year where they don't typically send us an amended contract for the services, but sometimes the service amount that we've agreed to does go up or go down throughout the year. But since this asked us to have an additional signature to it as it's entered into contract, we thought it was important to come back to the board for approval again. So that's the only change from last time to this time, is the dollar amount for the audiology services has been added into it based on the number of students that we anticipate will need that service in the fall. Any questions for me?
Matt, we'd look for a motion. Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Matt, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. All right, item 10.4, the organizational chart. Dr. Lexman.
Thank you. So the organization chart is something that, you know, ebbs and flows a little bit, and we sometimes bring it around once a year, sometimes more than once a year as things change within the organization. But because it's board approved, we do need to keep up to any changes and ask the board to reconsider and hopefully approve again. The changes in this one are the addition of the finance manager, and that's the position Jeff Borland is currently in. And then a position we added at the beginning of this school year, communications specialist. That was Deanne Yakledge, and now it's Liz Kazar, with Deanne staying at Lane in an AP role where the staff is very excited about having Deanne at Lane. And it's also updating names of people in various positions that were where we were a little bit behind. We wanted to make sure we brought this forward again. And you may see it again before the start of the new school year, just because we anticipate kind of an evolving structure as we figure out how to adapt to budget requirements, and as you know, people may have other opportunities. So with that, we'll present it for your consideration.
Brian?
I just have a question. I noticed under Franklin, it does not have a deeper learning coach listed. Is that just because there's not one currently in that role? Is the plan still to hire one as we move forward?
Deidre, do you want to respond to that one?
Yep. Yeah, currently it's because we don't have anyone in the role. We are being really sensitive to the budgetary concerns, as Marty indicated, and so it's still a spot reserved in the organizational chart, but we're holding off on posting those that are open at the present moment until we're sure that we have some of the administrative shifts that might be possible within the system, as well as just being really sensitive to what we understand about the budget. So we're just holding on with some of those postings until then. But at the present time, it's a seat on the org chart, and it is our intention to replace that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the organizational chart?
I would have a similar question that Brian had to West Milwaukee. They have a Bridges Sped deeper learning coach. They don't have a dedicated deeper learning coach listed.
Do you want me to jump in on that one, Marty?
Yes.
Yeah. So we shifted that role last year, Gary, to be the Dean of Culture and Climate, as it would more met the needs of what the staff was asking for, more met the needs of what the building needed at that time. And that was also the point at which we added the second innovation coach to pick up some of those deeper learning coaching activities. So that was that was really specific to feedback that we got from the West Milwaukee community. Kelsey Nowak is currently serving in that role, and she's very, very talented and amazing in that role. And so that is why that's a shift there.
Okay.
One last kind of quick question for me, unless somebody else has one. Were the people that are making moves to different positions, have they been notified and talked to, or is it pending the outcome of this vote?
No, they've been notified, talked to everybody that's on either shifting or has already shifted as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? That would look for a motion.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Great. Thank you. Right, we will then move on to item 10.5, the waivers to instructional hours and educator effectiveness requirements.
So I'll jump back in on this one. So we heard the feedback at the public hearing at our last meeting. But thanks, Gary, for the suggestion. We did put an FAQ up on the website just with some of the questions that we had fielded during the meeting, as well as the questions we received via email. I'd only received one additional question between the last meeting and this next one, and it was really related to workload and the amount of hours kids are expected to be online if we do take the waiver. And I shared with the person who asked me, and I put it on the FAQ, that how we manage the time that we have or the assignments that we do or the expectations on students, that's a site-based decision. This simply waives the required instructional hours from the Department of Public Instruction, which were in the executive summary that we had sent. As we know, there's no human possible way at the present moment to meet those particular hours. And then for the educator effectiveness waiver, that one is we've made the decision to request the right to have the year 3 roll over into the next year versus waiving it altogether, or it's staff that are ready to complete this year are welcome to, and that is a staff-based decision. So if they are ready to complete their year 3 evaluation, they will go forward with that year 3 evaluation as normal. We've reduced a few of the requirements that are normally in there just to be reflective of the fact that our staff has plenty on their plates at the present moment. So we tried to make the process as simple as possible. And so staff will fill out a form. Jeff had sent an email to each staff member who was in their year 3 to say that you can either choose to complete the evaluation this year or you can roll it over into next year. And so this waiver just gives us the official right to be able to do that under the statute. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that one?
No, I was just going to say that all of the individual employees have been notified, and then I sent out communication to building principals today letting them know who's decided to roll it into next year or those who are going to finish it this year. So that communication is current and just waiting on responses.
Any questions for Jeff or myself?
Will the staff have to roll over all next year in third-year cycle, or just once they are able to complete it?
I had a little bit of a hard time hearing the question, so let me know,
I
Kristen.
did not hear the question either.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Are teachers able to complete it as soon as they're able to, or do they have to repeat the whole third-year cycle?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So if they go into the cycle for next year, they would repeat the cycle, but they'll still collect all the information they have from this year. So it certainly wouldn't be as lengthy or as weighty for them to do that next year. The one thing that Jeff and I talked about quite a bit, and we talked about it at directors, was waiving the collection of artifacts. So that's where the teachers do spend a chunk of their time, is collecting all their artifacts. Instead, we ask them just to really focus on their reflection of where they felt they've been over the course of the 3 years. And that's why I think we had a more staff than you might think just say, I want to finish it this year and be done, especially if they don't have to collect all those artifacts. So yes, but they don't have to, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to wait until the tail end of next year, although their walkthroughs and things like that will go into that cycle still. It'll just be a 4-year cycle instead of a 3.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we would look for a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. Go on to item 10.6, the food service guarantee waiver.
All right, so this one is another implication of COVID. So we signed our contract with Sodexo starting for this year after our RFP process over the last spring. And in that new contract was what is called a guarantee. So it guarantees that we will add $475,000 to fund balance in Fund 50. So food services within Fund 50. And that's what's in our contract with Sodexo. So we will add $475,000 into Fund 50's fund balance at the end of the year. And that's based on their projections of how many students are going to be served during the year. So that was on track through February. And then with COVID, we have a dramatically reduced meal participation rate. So there's a few things that make this a little bit unique from other contractor decisions. One is that Fund 50 functions separately from Fund 10. So Fund 50 funds are only able to be spent on food service. So even if we have a culinary program within a high school, for example, that we want to spend funds on a new kitchen, we cannot use Fund 50 dollars. And then another component of this is that in fund balance within Fund 50, you can only have 3 months worth of operating expenses within your fund balance. And if you have more than that, they call it an excess cash balance, and you actually have to spend it down. And if you don't spend it down, what the feds could do is say, okay, well, we're going to just take away whatever's above and beyond that 3 months of operating expenses within your fund balance. And ironically enough, we got an email today from DPI that says, hey, you're over it once again you're exceeding your cash, that 3 months worth of operating expenses cash balance. So tell us how you're spending that money. So we've been working with food service and with our facilities department over the last, probably almost 15 months on the projects that are needed that are not just spending money to spend money, but actually creating efficient uses of coolers and freezers. We're bringing in within some of our facilities. We're also having HVAC associated and facility structure work associated with those new coolers and freezers. So those are efficiency upgrades for us, definitely. And we're excited about those, but those are pretty much our last really big projects that need to take place. And even when we finish those projects, which are supposed to be finished before school starts in the fall, which will be finished before school starts in the fall, even with those, we're still at the very top end of our cash balance we're supposed to have within Fund 50. So what this action item is requesting is that we waive the need for Sodexo to meet that $475,000 addition to fund balance. What they're looking at right now is a projection of, instead of increasing it by $475,000, at the end of the year, it's looking like it'll increase by $350,000. So the waiver doesn't say we're just not gonna get any addition to fund balance with 150. Instead, it just says Sodexo doesn't have to make up that difference. So we're still looking at an increase of $350,000 into fund balance, which still means we have to come up with additional ways to spend. And our Financial Stability and Efficiency Committee met a couple days ago, and we talked through this and brainstormed some of additional ideas in terms of CEP for more schools. And there's tons of regulations with food service because it's a federal program, but we are still looking to some of these things. We talked about a food truck, so there are some ideas we have, but this waiving this the guarantee, as it's called, doesn't put us in a precarious situation by any means. It actually kind of helps us out a little bit because we do still have that excess cash balance, and also supports Sodexo, who's been a long-term partner for us in a time when they're also being impacted by COVID.
Any questions for Kaylin? Noah?
I just want to say that, as Caitlin mentioned, we did discuss this at our financial committee meeting most recently, by myself, Gary, and Christine, and we were in agreement that this would be an okay thing to do waiver-wise based on the things that Caitlin talked about.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the waiver? If not, we'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. All right, we will now move into our workshops for this evening. We will go to item 11.1, the secondary grading discussion.
All right, so I'll introduce this and then Deidre can go into the details. Districts all over the country are trying to figure out, what are the appropriate practices for their school district regarding, in particular, secondary grading. Given kind of where we are and what's the right thing to do for kids, what's the right thing to do for GPAs that make kids eligible for scholarships. And different districts have taken different approaches, even within our area. And today, the news came out that MPS has moved to what many districts have done, which is simply a pass-fail. Wauwatosa has taken a little bit different approach than pass-fail. They went with either you get an A, a B, or an incomplete, and in speaking with Phil Ertl, the intent there is unless a student that has an incomplete didn't show up and didn't try to correct it at all, that would turn into an F. But after that, they're going to turn those grades into a pass. And I think the general effort is try to minimize the number of kids that end up credit deficient moving into the next school year, without compromising expectations too much. And that's a little bit of when we had a long conversation with our secondary leaders and part of Deidre's team, and we landed in a little different place that I think strikes a nice balance for West Allis, West Milwaukee. And Deidre, you can take it from there.
Thank you. Like Marty said, we've been doing quite a bit of research in our area and asking everyone around town, like, what is your plan for grading practices and what is your plan for grading practices? So we've been gathering that information for a while. Quite a few districts are leaning at pass-fail, and as Marty shared, our concern with doing pass-fail is that we have students who really do plan for that race to the graduation moment, that valedictorian, salutatorian, third, fourth, in the top 10 of the class, from the minute they walk into high school at freshman year. They start actually the summer before freshman year, sometimes taking courses then. And so they strategically take some of those courses in line each semester in order to kind of plot out where they might land at the end of that race for some of the highest honors. And as those are tied to scholarship money, it was really important to us to be sensitive to that and do something with grading that had the least amount of impact on those opportunities for kids. And so sometimes that comes down to the night before graduation a few years where that person, first and second, have changed seats. And so we wanted to be sure that we didn't have a huge impact on that. And then at the same time, looked at our learners who might end up credit deficient and after this semester that we would have really struggled to help, not knowing what summer school for sure is going to look like, not knowing what next fall at the present moment is for sure going to look like. So we were trying to take into account as many scenarios as possible. And that is part of what we did at the meeting that we had with our secondary leaders, as well as our technology department, because they also had some insight into Skyward and how it functions and what parts of Skyward would, have the least amount of impact on going forward. And then on top of that, we took a look at where third quarter grades were compared to where fourth quarter grades are at least our two comprehensive high schools, so that we could say, how far off are we between how kids were trending in performance going into this whole thing versus where they are now. So we really wanted to make sure we had taken into account as many factors as possible before we kind of landed on an idea. And where we landed was that for our intermediate schools and our high schools, that we would follow our current grading scale. So our same grading scale that we use, A+, A minus, that same grading scale that we use all the way through for the remainder of the semester. And so we will do that all the way up until any new assignments that have been established between, when we started in the fourth quarter up through May 1st. At that point, we'll shift to there being the opportunity for enrichment activities for students as they need them, as they go forward, for our learners who want to continue pursuing, certain parts of the math curriculum, certain parts of the social studies curriculum. We'll primarily switch to teams working on their passion projects. And then we'll give a longer window of time for kids to be doing makeup work and trying to make sure that they can do what they need to do so that anything that is an F, then they have the opportunity to make up. At the end of the semester, anything that's recorded as an F would become an incomplete, similar to the way that Wauwatosa is doing their work. And before we did that, we would take a look back at where things were at the end of the third quarter to make sure that we didn't have a B student who suddenly got an F in something, when we don't know exactly what all the students are doing during this time, or what other factors could be happening that might have impacted that, where there would be such a drastic shift in the grades. So the teachers will use that time at the end to also look back to the previous quarter to say, okay, is the grade in line with what they were performing at up until that point? And then they'll give them the benefit of the doubt in the higher of the two grades. The passion projects will replace the final exams at both high schools. And then the middle schools will use, our intermediate schools will use, again, their similar grading procedure, the same reverence for, watching out for Fs and making sure that kids have what they need in this opportunity to do makeup work, and yet have access to enrichment work as they need it during this time to keep moving forward with whatever they were progressing in. So that is the plan at the present moment. Did I miss anything?
No, well, the one thing I'd like to mention is the reason we're not talking about elementary schools is because our standards-based grading practices and the new standards-based report card adapts really well to the current situation. So there's no need to make any changes there.
Yeah, I will add to that, when we talk about grading and grading practices right now, the number of our elementary staff and leaders who have said, thank goodness we have this new report card, has been very, very high. But it also, in our first year, we are going to send out a survey to elementary staff, just getting some feedback from them on how many standards are in it as well. To know, like, after we've tried it for a whole year, did we catch the right ones? Did we, do we have too many on there, so that we can make some adjustments going forward as well? Because that's the feedback we've gotten so far from teachers, is it looked good at the start, but it feels like there's maybe too many on there. And then during this time, how many of those standards are they covering, and those kinds of things are adjustments that our elementary staff are making as we speak and thinking about as we speak, so we can send them out a survey and narrow it down to make sure we've really hit at the right I can statements in the elementary report card. One other thing to it is that we also got feedback from staff. So staff in both buildings were in favor of replacing the exam grade with the passion project. And staff know how difficult the rest of the decisions are on grading. They're, much like school calendar and closing for a snow day, where it's really hard to figure out the best way to do that and make sure nobody, you've accounted for all the individuals that are involved. But we really did take some time at a meeting, like Marty said, to say, okay, let's run 4 or 5 different scenarios and make sure that we have, come up with a system that we think really gives the benefit of the doubt in as many situations as possible, but also doesn't harm kids that are, on track with some of those weighted grades and some of those other things, to be in that running for that top 10 at the other end of the time that we have. Brian, did you have a question?
I do. So the passion project, that's, as you said, going to replace the exam grades. So that's the case, whether it's math, science, Spanish, art, no matter what the class is, and no matter what the passion project is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was, again, with feedback from the teachers as well, is the best place to put that. There's not a great way to do a final exam. If you wanted to do a traditional final exam, that's a huge concern for everyone in our area as well. Many districts have just said, we're not doing final exams this year. There's no way to make sure that kids aren't, accessing each other or different information as you do them. They were just too hard to implement as you normally maybe would do a final exam. And so that was what the teachers felt comfortable with as well.
I guess my only thought is, if a passion project has absolutely nothing to do with a certain course, why is that being 10% of the grade in that class then? I don't know that really equates to their learning in that particular topic, I guess.
Yeah, and I think where the teachers felt more comfortable with that, Brian, is that it really hits at the deeper learning work that we've been talking about and pushing towards. Communication skills are involved in every single course that we have, right? So no matter what course we're doing right now, we want our kids doing problem solving, communication skills. We want them collaborating with each other. And that's how the projects really are framed, is this opportunity to embed content in them at an academic level. Certainly we would never ignore that part of the work, but you might be demonstrating for your Spanish class are some of your articulation and your communication skills differently necessarily than your mastery of the language in the course of your project. Or you might be doing your project all in Spanish, but at the same time for your English class, you've done some kind of writing, and then you've also done your problem solving and your communication and those types of things within there. So it was an opportunity to hit at that shot to start saying, what does it look like if we were gonna truly jump into our profile of a graduate work and we say, well, what does it look like if a student graduates from us with an academic mindset or self-direction or problem solving and communication skills? This is an opportunity for us to start figuring some of that out and making sure that it's embedded with content mastery, because that is one of the 6 competencies. And the reason we've aligned our work to the deeper learning competencies is it's really all encompassing. So that's kind of the hope in the project.
And Deidre's reference to, this is similar to snow days, and what that's about is there's no way to get this absolutely right. We're going to have a whole bunch of people that think this is great because it kind of brings down the pace and the temperature of expectations, and we've heard feedback around that. And we're going to have families that think this is not the right direction to go. So we're just in one of those moments we're trying to find, what we feel is an appropriate balance, but we have to accept the fact that there's no way to get this perfect.
And we've been thankful for all of the feedback we've gotten from families, both on the families who aren't, are struggling a bit with what we've done, as well as the families that are reaching out to us to express concern about workload and things like that. It's allowed us to make some adjustments. We were always planning to leave those enrichment activities out there for students. We don't want them not having those, but we're doing a better job at communicating that that's still available to learners as they need it based on some of the feedback we've heard from the community. So we're always thankful to get that feedback, and therefore then helps us make some adjustments. But apologize if I didn't make that clear, because yes, this is one of those decisions we've tried to take as many possible routes and things into consideration, but we are going to have some of our community that's not absolutely thrilled with the direction that we chose.
So real quick, so 2 things. When we talked about this earlier in this week as we were getting ready for the agenda, I told Marty and Deidre, I said, no matter what we do, it's wrong. Right. I mean, and that's just kind of where it is. And we have to be aware of that. And Deidre and Marty have laid out kind of the reasons why it's going to be wrong no matter what. And so now it's finding what's wrong for the least amount of people, right? But also when they mentioned doing staff research and asking the questions, we asked to have Matt come on board too to the meeting tonight and kind of provide some feedback on how he got research at Hale, and how the staff responded and what everything went on there to see, from in the trenches what's going on and how they want to implement and what the feedback was. So if Matt, if you want to unmute and kind of give us a little bit of a summary from your perspective, that'd be great.
And Stephanie, I'm going to jump in on that just for 1 second, because I did not get the chance to reach out to Jeff and Matt and include them for tonight. So Matt was here.
Sorry, Matt.
Closed session. So I just want to think Jeff certainly would have been here. So that was an error on my part, and I apologize.
Well, Matt,
I'm on the second part, so I thought I'd add on too.
Okay.
So on the next part of the meeting. So what we did was when we rolled it out, we talked a little bit about things that would affect the staff, and part of that is grading and the concept around grading. And in a perfect world, you may not have to grade something like this, because it would be awesome if everybody just went all in and just did that, So it seems like if we're going to do something for 3 weeks, the way our kind of system works in education is things get graded, right? So not 3 weeks of non-graded feedback. So if we were going to grade, then it was one of those questions, how do we grade? So brainstormed with at Hale, brainstormed with my department chair group of about 15 of us, talking about what are some options about how would we utilize this, like a grade replacement or exam grades, or some of the exam grades or something. And it overwhelmingly, out of the 4 choices came out, roughly above like 50 to 60 people that responded, said replace all exam scores. And then the rest were like below 10, the other 3 choices. So it was overwhelmingly a situation where the whole staff, so we brainstormed it as a department chair group, came up with the 4 options, got it out to all staff, did a Google survey. Took a little bit more time, but on those things that are going to impact their job, it's kind of nice to get feedback before you do that. So so they were able to do that, and that's kind of where we ended up with that. And we did have dialogue. Brian heard that from a standpoint of, my project is on these 2 content pieces, but how does that relate to that other content? Maybe I did a project and it hit English and math, but not science or something. So why would we count it there? And, and going back to what, Deidre was talking about is, with the focus of the deeper learning competencies and the focus of our strategic plan around the profile of a graduate with those 6 competencies. And when I sent out my message to parents, I did a video on all these different questions that I gathered from parents and sent out this 8-minute video the other day that they could kind of listen to, why are we kind of those questions? Why are we not doing curriculum for 3 weeks? Or why is it the exams and where is it happening? And all that. I did a kind of a Q&A to myself and shot a video out to people. And that's one of those things where we've made the commitment to the deeper learning competencies, and I don't know how much we're able to get at in the last 8 weeks, really going at all those deeper learning competencies when you look at them. And this is a great opportunity to make that happen. So I know that deep down you might be going, some people may be going, where's the content? There always is going to be content. I mean, you can't do a project with no content. It's just like, where does that content connect? And then when they meet with the advisor, it's really the advisor connecting those individuals to content teachers to make the project as good as possible. I know that Dr. Lexman sent out that community group questionnaire, like who would be willing to work with our students. So that's an avenue to extend content. If the student we'll have kids that, I just got this project from somebody that said, hey, would this be a good project, Mr. Lesser? My son has for 2 months now since COVID remodeled a room with his father, and they've been taking pictures of it and talking about processes and things. And I said, well, you think there's any content there? There's math, there's engineering, there's problem solving. It's all this stuff built into that. And she goes, oh, so he can continue like monitoring that, and then through the advisor, through those 3 weeks working through our homerooms at both Hale and Central, they'll be able to be coached through, a deeper piece about like, what kind of math did you use? Tell me about that. Do you realize, reflect on that. What else would you need to do? What would you do different this time when you had to like kind of kick the door into the door jamb to make it work, and things like that. So definitely content related around the deeper learning competencies. And like I said, now we're getting all 6 competencies involved with a huge project, which is pretty exciting. And it'll be pretty powerful once, and with those advisors, we both buildings met with their teachers on Friday, kind of that planning day, and went through like, we've created things where there's like, what questions you ask kids to work through that deeper thinking process and take it more than, oh, I did it in a day and I wrote a reflection paper. It's bigger than that, and it's going to be driven by those weekly check-ins through that process up to that 3-week exhibition of their learning, which they'll do with their advisories. So kind of a neat thing. So I know I'm talking a lot about it, but yeah, there was input around those things, around what the projects would look like. There was concern about all these different aspects. What does the communication outlook like, and what does the rubric look like? So we did some pre-development to take some of that off the teacher's plate, because it was like, when do we fit this all in? And then got feedback from the department chairs once again, and then kind of went out and did the PD on it last Friday. And then I think the other thing, there was something else the enrichment. Yes, so that's the other part. It's like, I know that Dr. Lexman mentioned that in his letter about not giving up what's working for some and not working for others. And this profile piece is needed by everybody. All these deeper learning competencies. With my son at UW-Madison, he uses these competencies constantly, and it's good experience. And he can definitely tell those teammates that he's working on this senior year who doesn't quite have that self-directed piece, who can't collaborate and communicate very well yet. And and so yeah, I get that feedback from him often about how his projects are going at the college level, because they're doing the same stuff we're doing. And so that enrichment piece, it is not I mean, I'm looking at an email right here because I got my other screen here that says, what do we, with music? Yeah, no doubt, like music. Yeah, totally. If they're uploading 2 music pieces during the week, and you have people that want to keep uploading 2 music pieces and teachers can get feedback, teachers on that May 4th at the high school level will be posting, like, I would say, it's not really like this, but this is the way you can word it, like that missed content time, that exact whatever they're missing, they can post in there. Like math can say, hey, these would be, 6 or 8 Alex topics you may want to work on if you're looking to continue doing the math, like the math classroom math class, and the other student that's doing the building construction thing is going to integrate his math into his building construction thing with his dad. So he's getting math there. Other people what's working with that kid is the Alex, but other kids, it's not the Alex, so there's, and we'll keep doing, they can upload their music, still get feedback on their music. If someone was going to do a short story unit, they can say, hey, pick out one of these short stories if you so choose and write about it. I'll give you feedback on your writing if you'd like that. So it'll meet at kind of everybody's needs at this point in time. So,
and I can jump in and just give some feedback from Jeff, because again, that was on me.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay on my list of things to do. So Jeff and Brian and Jim at Central, as well as Steve Carr, who's the school support, have been doing very similar to what Matt has talked about. They've been meeting with their ILT, they've been meeting with individual departments, they've been talking about what this could look like, they've been talking about the kids that they're concerned about, much to that same high level. And the teachers at Central and the feedback that they got at Central was that also is the place that makes the most sense. Many of the teachers were really excited at the opportunity to try something different. And then we have teachers that are concerned about that as well, just like everything else. But it is really a nice time for us to be thinking about the competency work that we're trying to embed, and how do we really give that a try and see what our learners are able to do. And then how do we take that feedback to shift and some things that we need to start embedding in every single course as we go through around some of the self-direction pieces, or how heavily are kids really ready to collaborate, and how do we assess that, and how do we know when those skills are, what's the demonstration of mastery for some of those things, as well as mini public demonstrations of learning that we've talked about a number of times at the board around how powerful those experiences are. The first time the kids get the taste of that public demonstration of learning, it's really hard to hold them back from reflection and iteration and growing their skills after that. So this is an opportunity to practice that at our secondary schools, some of which have already been doing that, and in our high schools where we haven't had the chance to do that yet. So we'll do it in whatever virtual format we can figure out. But yeah, Jeff and team at Central have followed a very similar process to what Matt described, to be working through this entire thing with teachers as well.
And it did, like I said, it was a process working with staff members. I mean, it's a transition. It's something new and different. It's a great opportunity because that's the direction we're going in as a district around giving these kids the opportunities and larger kind of project concepts. So definitely some people are more comfortable than others, but I think over time, it was nice when we came back from spring break, and then we had like these 3 weeks to get our head around it, and then have the professional day to plan and come together again. So I think that was a good choice in that we were able to extend it out a little bit, get it done yet this year and do it yet part of this year, but allow for a little bit more marinating on it, because that helped their needs as well, and didn't want to stress them out to a different, to that level as well. But I think everybody's feeling pretty comfortable now.
Christine, you had a question.
Christine, you had a question. I think Noah too. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Going back to what Stephanie had said, is we understand that we're not going to please everyone, right? But for those kids who do plan the summer before they hit freshman year on reaching those high goals, what about our kids who are taking, 3-4 AP classes? Is this passion project going to replace their opportunity to be able to take those advanced placement tests?
No, not one bit. Yeah, no.
You want me to talk about that?
Go ahead, Matt. You've done a ton of legwork on this one, so go ahead.
So we met, and and so we went around, and I see April still on here, so if she wanted to say something, April, if she's listening, April is part of our AP group. So at Hale, we met as the AP staff and kind of said, you know, with a kid with one AP class as a freshman versus 3, 4, or 5 of them as a junior or senior, because you can take more, would it be, originally I suggested, well, maybe the kids with one could still do the project, and then kids with a lot of them maybe would put the project off until they're, because it's during the same AP window, and we didn't want to stress them out. April, I think, actually came up with the idea that, hey, why don't we just meet with the kids individually, come up with like a change of timeline or something like that. Like maybe you meet with the kid originally, say, what's your topic? They go, blah, whatever it is. And they go, well, are you comfortable doing it right now? Or do you want to like push it off to your last exam? And those teachers, just so you know, the AP teachers will continue, April's one of them, will continue to have daily instruction where the other classes don't have daily instruction. So we figured out that our METC credited transcripted courses still have to instruct daily. AP classes still have to instruct daily, okay, to get the best results. But like I said, it came back to groups of kids that would maybe be stressed out and have to study and do this brand new thing so they can work with their teachers. I don't know, April, you want to add in anything? That was a great idea. So you want to say anything about that?
I was making dinner and then I heard my name.
Okay. No, I just said I suggested at the beginning that kind of kids with only one exam are maybe stressed out less than 3, but then it was brought forward that, well, our freshmen might be the most stressed out, you know, so because it's their first one. And then I said, you suggested, why don't we meet with each individual kid and like talk to them, like what are their needs, and just kind of have this floating kind of, like some of our freshmen, I think the freshman exam is the second day of the AP window. So they can meet prior, get their topic, and then if they don't want to start till after their AP test is done, then you start there, and you still have the rest of the window plus that last 9 days after, before June 5th, to complete it if that's the way they feel it. But does that make sense, April?
Yeah, I mean, does anyone have any questions about that? Basically, we've got kids, you know, taking multiple tests, multiple days. Some kids will be finished on the first day of testing. They won't have anything left. Some kids will be testing both, you know, weeks of the AP test. And so we've just tried to really honor how they're feeling about it and what they want to do. But yeah, all the AP teachers are still resuming test prep, like hard. We're going hard at the test prep. So.
Great, thank you for that.
And then from the AP standpoint, just to let you know too, their passion project we talked about, and AP teachers are going to talk to their kids this week, could actually be about AP prep. So they could reflect and review, like, because this is totally new. So you have a senior that's been doing this AP test, this 3-hour test for 3 years. Now they have a 45-minute period that's free response only. And it's like totally throwing them into a different loop. So their passion project, we made up a bunch of, with the help of Mary Washbush, our academic dean, or coach, is made up a variety of AP reflection questions that the students can reflect and actually make that part of their passion project. Like, how will this get you ready for next year? What do you see if you're a senior? Will this get ready for college level? What do you see? All those things. So we're trying to use some of it that they're doing as possibly a passion project idea.
Yeah, and we've had additionally resources available to students studying for AP for free this year that had never been available to them before. So we have some learners who are starting to say, well, I would like to advocate that those be free all the time. Like, why were they free this year when other times they weren't free? And maybe I would have an advantage in this year and maybe I wouldn't. And so there's all kinds of things related to kind of what's consuming their lives at the present moment that might be something that relates to what they want to reflect on and give feedback on when this is all said and done.
Kristen, did you still have a question?
Yeah, my question is, I'm still very concerned when it comes to equity and all this, and I'm a big proponent of project-based learning. We've talked about that, but I'm just wondering what the engagement levels are currently among intermediate and high school students that are in those tier 2, tier 3 levels.
That's a great question, and we have had higher levels of engagement in a lot of cases than we even were hoping for, and so that's been exciting. Some of our programs, our middle intermediate programs that have been doing project-based learning for a long time have stuck to some of the project-based learning, and that's kept a higher level of engagement in some cases. Our teachers are excited to have the opportunity to shift so that we can make sure that we are starting to engage all the students and being able to look at their grading practice from that equity lens to say, are we sure that we're meeting, as many possible lenses within what we've shifted to and what we're shifting to for grading as possible. That was kind of one of the goals, is to make sure we're taking into account, again, those kids vying for that valedictorian seat, as well as a student who's really struggling right now and maybe has some life factors going on that are making the engagement in school really hard. So we've had a pretty high level of participation. It has certainly dropped off since spring break, not shocking, right? We've had lots of learners reaching out saying it's too hard for them to balance the 6 courses, and lots of feedback that families and some of those students are really excited that we're shifting to this because they had been working on things at home. And we'll get a variety of level of a project out of it at the end, we know that. But it's a good first start and an opportunity for us to say, okay, that was a first attempt, and what other things can you learn about yourself during this time, and what things can you get engaged in? Some of our learners that attend DACI, who historically are kids that struggle to connect to school because we're still serving a very high population of students who, were headed to the alternative high school. They were struggling quite a bit, and then they get pretty strong response, and then it kind of wanes back and forth. And so they're excited for this next step as well, because it aligns to exactly what they were doing in advisory for them. And that's then upticked a bit on the number of kids that are kind of engaging and going back and forth. So hopefully that answers your question.
Noah, you have a question too?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood one part here. Regards to the progress report, so it's the 4th bullet in the recommendation. May 1st, teachers will do a look back to compare the current 4th quarter grade to 3rd quarter grade. So is that the grade as of May 1 is the end of 3rd quarter, or is that the 4th quarter grade that's going to be looked back to 3rd quarter?
It's the 4th quarter progress report time. So that's like that midpoint check for the 4th quarter that will look back to the 3rd quarter. So like I was saying, if we had a student who was a solid B student all the way through and is suddenly getting an F, we want to be sure that we are taking into account all of those kind of individual factors that are going on. So that's that look back period, is to compare where we are on May 1st, which would be the progress report time, back to the 3rd quarter grade.
And then that will be their 4th quarter grade total, or moving forward?
Moving forward, it would be the kind of the benefit of the doubt in that situation, to say, if you really have a student, again, that's, if it's so inconsistent, we want to be sure that we're taking into account some of those factors and some of the participation that they've done.
And could that grade still go down based on the performance? So it's basically, that's what it is.
Only if it goes up. Yeah.
Only
yeah.
goes
The goal being that we want to give the students as many opportunities as possible to raise the current grade without impacting some of, again, the other factors that we have going on right now that some kids can't control, and lowering grades.
Okay.
There's quite a few districts in our area that have gone to that system. Like, anything that you can do is value add to your grade, but the grades can't, go down after a certain point. That's not inconsistent with what a lot of school districts in our area have done. Some have gone to purely grades are frozen, and if you do anything, they go up. And there wasn't a period where they continued some of the instruction, but we also wanted to honor the time that some of our learners and our staff have put in during the last couple of weeks as well.
Okay. And I'd say I only have UW-Madison as my lens, and it's kind of similar there, that the grades are posted for my son on May 8th. And then he has till May 22nd to decide if he wants to change any of them to pass fail, so it doesn't impact his grade point. That's anybody UW-Madison. So it's basically a look back, and if your grade helps your grade point, you keep your grade. If not, you defer to pass fail, so it doesn't do anything to your grade point. So that's UW-Madison. So it's kind of similar with that concept that some of the districts are doing with that, is that it's only going to be a benefit, otherwise you can take a pass fail and not, but you've earned what you've earned so far. I mean, that's why we're looking back at quarter 3, because you truly earned your quarter 3 grade because you're still in school.
Heather, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just am wondering, with our staff members who are teaching AP and regular education and regular classes, how is that going to affect them if they have to continue to prep for their AP and do passion projects with their regular students?
Good question.
So you want me to answer that?
You
Okay.
can, yeah, because again,
So
that's similar.
really tried to embrace.
Matt,
Yeah.
can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
I did not hear it from Heather.
So the question is, with the overload of the teachers with AP, they still got to be online instructing their class. How do they manage the passion project piece with their kids?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right, Heather.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this was all part of, I mean, that's why the 3-week window there to really talk to staff, talk to the departments, AP teachers, department chairs was critical to make it work well. So what we did is we sent out a Google survey to ask anybody that, and we didn't even take, we went to another extreme. We kind of, you could have AP classes. I have one teacher that teaches 4 AP classes. Okay, that was because we had a shift of staff that left, and he had, normally they don't have 4. So that's on the extreme. Most of them maybe have 2 if they're teaching it, like a double of it, and a bunch have 1. But if they felt as though they could rate themselves that have a high, medium, or low need of a support, okay, and they could say that, and actually we met today on that to brainstorm. We have, I think 12 people that asked for support, maybe a few more, and they said, yeah, I could do about half of my homeroom, but could somebody else help me with the other half to work through the project? So we have the 6 administrators, the 6 student services, so that's 12. Deidre, no, I'm kidding. No, she said she would. In our building,
I signed Marty up to be a project advisor
they all
and
said
I
they would do
volunteered.
them. You know, but I think we got it covered. So it's the 12, and then who else do we have? I thought there was a different cluster. What am I missing? Oh, and then we have people that maybe were traveling teachers that were their home school, but they don't have a homeroom. And so we have like 5 of them as well. So we have about 18 people that we can like pull 5 and give them the lesser, pull 5. And so the AP teachers got to say if they needed support, okay, with their homeroom on the project. The other end though is too, it's not all about that. What about the kids because between then and the end of the year, some kids are doing a lot of grade enhancement. You might want to say a grade makeup or whatever, but it's D's going to B's and et cetera. It could be an F going to a D. Got to get prep. So that other end, maybe like a teacher might say, I have these 5 classes. It seems like I'm gonna have a lot of makeup work and I'm gonna do a lot of contacts those weeks. I need support too. So we kind of looked at both ends so they could put it in too. So I have a teacher that teaches all regular 9th grade class. And they're like, I can't do it all because I know what the makeup work's gonna look like. And so we're taking half of his homeroom, his advisory, and giving it to one of us. So great question with that, Heather. But yeah, with the input from the staff, I mean, we're just trying to balance everything in those 3 weeks right now. Like the AP, the MATC, like, oh yeah, the MATC one, she said I could handle like half of my homeroom, but could somebody else help me with the other half? Because I have 10 people still doing the MATC accredited course, transcripted. Sure, we'll assign you to a teacher. You know, I know
And we
another
have
teacher.
other support staff as well, Matt, that the teachers of students with special needs, they're going to be supporting projects and supporting.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, they're all working with their case management group
Picking up a few advisors and being some of those things.
So those make those homerooms smaller then because they don't have homerooms, the special ed support. They have a support hour that they help kids during that time and things. So they don't really have a designated time. So I have a dozen of them that are able to take out their groups of kids and go work with their kids that they've had relationships for a number of years. So that's a good thing too. So
Kristen, you had a question too?
Yeah, just real quick, do you have like a rubric outline for how this looks? And could you share it at some point? It doesn't have to be like here.
We do at both. The idea was that the kind of overarching big idea is what we're holding in common. And then each school developed their own based on that input from staff and based on the needs of their kids and based on kind of where they were when we started some of those things. So each school has been developing their own plan, but we're happy. I can share those in my next board update, some of the samples from some of the schools so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what's out there. But that was developed at each school site, again, based on some of these, like similar to what Matt's saying. They did the same thing at Central with a lot of conversation and a lot of input and a lot of like, what would this look like and what could it look like for kids?
good, thank you. I just wanted to see that there's something concrete for the kids to grab onto.
Yep, and project plans and all of those kinds of things as well.
Marty, will this come back to the board for review or approval, or are we moving forward? What's the next step on that?
Yep, good question. At this time, given that we're not changing grading scales, we already have A, B, C, D, F, and incomplete is an option in our current system. The way I read the policies, it doesn't require board action, but we definitely wanted the board well informed about what we're doing, and if there were any big holes that you're concerned about, before we start taking next steps and communicating this to staff and in particular to parents, because that's when you're going to start to get questions.
So we'll just have a continuous communication stream. So with the board updates and Friday notes and things like that, we'll be able to just get some updates on how things are going, if there's been any changes, modifications, any updates to timeline, things like that. But otherwise, status quo based on the proposal today.
And Beth's already started the communication to staff and to families, just making sure that it's as clear as possible. She and I worked on that for a while today. So I thought, oh, that reads funny. Let's, make sure that we're as clear as possible in our communication.
Great. Any other questions for our team? Thank you all for the work that went into this. I know this is not easy. Like you said, there's lots of districts doing lots of different things and lots of work that goes into this. And thank you to all the staffs who are adjusting, and thank you to all the families who are going to be accommodating into all the students who, trying to do our best for them as best as we can. So thank you to everybody for the work that went into all of this. So the ongoing work. So thank you. All right, if there isn't anything else, we'll move on to the next part of our workshops this evening, which is 11.2, Financial Stability and Efficiency, Proposed 2020-2021 Budget and Preliminary Tax Levy number 1.
Yes, all right, so I am going to share my screen. All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome, this is the first time I've shared. So, all right, so we're gonna go through our preliminary budget for next year as of, I wanna say Thursday, because in this environment, things are changing very frequently, and it's sort of a turbulent time in terms of budgeting. So, spent a few weeks trying to make this the most seamless way possible to explain high level what's going on at the state, how that affects us, and then what our budget's looking like for next year. And then all of a sudden on Friday, on a call with our WASBO director and a few area school districts, we hear some new information. So I'll talk through what that looks like for us. So I just have to start out by saying, giving a huge shout out to our team, every single department. I mean, from food service, these pictures are really awesome. Our new normal on the left of, delivering meals. We work to get hot meals or meals that can be heated up instead of just the typical cold meal that we have been doing. Love the little thank you note on the right. Again, technology, making sure that learning at home is seamless. Our curriculum department and facilities, everybody has just been doing an awesome job making sure learning is being as continuous as possible. So looking at how COVID is affecting our budget, it's helpful to get an idea of how it's affecting the state's budget. So, and then how does that trickle down to our school districts? So we're gonna take a 10,000 foot view of the state budget first, and then how that affects us. So Wisconsin's rainy day fund was the highest it's been in state history at $649 million as of the end of last fiscal year, so 6/30/19. And while that reserve was high, the anticipated revenue shortfalls from COVID we know will exceed this amount. So how does revenue that the state gets affect our revenue? Well, the state gets aid from a few different sources that go into this category called general purpose revenues, and those are the revenues that we then see in terms of our state aid. So the few general purpose revenues that exist are lower income, or our income taxes, sales taxes, and gas taxes. And all three of those are being majorly impacted right now with COVID. So
obviously the state is seeing a lot lower income tax because fewer people are working. State is seeing a lot less sales tax revenue because a lot fewer things are being purchased statewide. And then of course people are traveling less, so there's less gas being purchased. So all of those things are impacting the revenues that the state has in their category called general purpose revenues. And those general purpose revenues are how we get state aid. So how that looks like, what that looks like for us is the current biennial budget, next year's numbers for our per pupil aid, our per pupil revenue limit, is $179 increase on this year's number. So our per pupil revenue in 1920 this year is a little bit over $10,000. And then next year with the state biennial budget, we get $179 more. That's what's currently in the state statute. And typically the second year in the state budget is the easier one because we know the factors right away, nice and early. And actually right now, the state is looking at, they're going to have to be changing those numbers, what we're getting for per pupil revenue next year. So prior to Thursday, we were being recommended to use a new number of a decrease of $50. So not just keeping it the same, our revenue per kid this year to next year, but actually decreasing it by $50. And with that decrease, that translates to roughly about $600,000 less in revenue than the $179 per student within our revenue limit. The new information that came out on Friday, which there's no specifics whatsoever right now, but we're being told now that that negative $50, that decrease of $50 per student is likely now our best case scenario, where before they were telling us, and they being SAA, School Administrators Alliance, now we're being told that that might be our best case scenario because the farther along COVID, before our businesses are open and we get back to a new normal, the longer that takes, the less revenue the state's getting and the more that's going to impact us. So we're hoping to hear within the next couple of weeks some more specifics on new projected numbers we should be using per student. But this is based on, this presentation was completed on Thursday, so I didn't change everything up because there's no new hard numbers to be using. We just can project it's probably gonna be a little bit worse than this $50 decrease. And then in terms of summer school, this is an interesting one. So summer school, the FTE that we have that go to summer school, we get to include in our FTE counts. So we have in our revenue limit 77 students in summer school. Well, summer school virtually, we can only count per state statute right now, students who attend summer school virtually from 7th through 12th grade who are earning credit for high school. If we can't hold summer school as normal and have to hold virtual summer school, that would decrease the amount of FTE we have in summer school, which would impact our 21-22 and 22-23 budgets. And not so much next year because of our declining enrollment exemption, but the state is currently working through some new legislation that would expand that ability for school districts to count FTE for summer school beyond just 7th through 12th grade. So we're still planning to work out the best way we can online virtual summer school for our students, and hoping and contacting our legislators to expand that legislation to count FTE for that school districts can count their summer school FTE within their revenue limit. So this quote I have in this next slide is, I included it, don't normally just put a bunch of words on a slide, but I thought it was a really good summary of the status of our situation right now across the state. So I'm just gonna read it. And this is from the School Administrators Alliance memo in early March. For 2021, potential new catch-up expenditures may be incurred to support student learning. For example, extended school year, or ESY, additional staff contract days, and higher operational costs associated with the longer school year. Budget planners should at least be aware of these possibilities. Patience will be required in budget development, and with it, caution regarding locking in firm commitments on salary increases, benefit plans, and even staffing levels until more is known about the state's capacity to fund public education. It is certainly possible that a climate of financial uncertainty might extend
into the summer or fall. So it's a good summary. And while it's a little bit bleak or a little bit scary, we are excited to say that we have issued all contracts to teachers this year. So we're not doing, as we talked about earlier, reduction in force. And we're confident that all the moves that have to take place to align staff with declining enrollment can happen through natural attrition and retirement. So with that, we do anticipate there are going to be some moves that have to take place. From if we're in need of a high school teacher, a middle school teacher with that certification might have to move to that high school position, but it meant that we didn't have to reduce force through our method that we did last year, and all teachers were issued contracts, or nobody was not issued a contract due to declining enrollment. So in a time of uncertainty, we're really happy to be able to do that for our staff. And while we are looking at reduced revenue, there are some other optimistic signs out there too. So this year, our state will be paying the full amount of 1920 aids, so we will not be impacted in terms of revenue this year. The state has also explained that they have additional funds, but that distribution formula is to be determined. So while we can anticipate probably some additional funds, we have no idea who's getting what and how much. On the federal side, through the CARES Act, we will be receiving about 75 to 80% of our Title I allocation in a separate additional revenue to our district. So that equates to approximately $1.4 million, and we'll talk through later how that will be used. But it's important to know that this is additional money. It's not replacing our Title I allocation, it's additional. They just used that formula because it already existed, and it takes into account school economic, the socioeconomic factors within school districts. So that is a really positive sign for us that we'll be getting that money that can help support us through future budget or next year's budget. So what this means now is that it's time to strategize how we can utilize unspent funds this year to balance next year's budget. And typically, our goal is to spend this year's funds on this year's students. However, it would be irresponsible for us to not utilize strategies that we can this year in terms of our unspent funds to supplement future budgets. So in mid-March, when we learned that we were going to be learning from home, we created a purchasing freeze, and that's helping us support our future budgets, and I'll kind of walk through in what capacity that is. So we anticipate at the end of 1920 that we will have somewhere between $3 million to $5 million in a surplus. And that seems like a lot of money, but just remember that our budget is about $106 million. So this is really only a 2% difference in a preliminary projection for the surplus at the end of the year. So some recommendations on how we can utilize that surplus. The first recommendation is to move $500,000 into fund balance. So if you'll remember, our strategic plan has that we have our fund balance at 20% of our budget, which would be about $21 million approximately. We're a little over 18. So using that first $500,000 so let's say we talk conservative numbers, that our projected surplus at the end of the year is $3 million. If we take the first $500,000, move to fund balance to support our strategic plan, keep that growing, and we know that a strong fund balance and a growing fund balance is good for our credit rating, and we do know that a credit rating impacts our interest rate when we borrow. And then the next recommendation is that $325,000 of a surplus is moved into Fund 46. So a reminder of what Fund 46 is. We have a turf field replacement plan. So Fund 46 is where that money is held until that replacement plan comes time to purchase the new fields. And we have, per the plan, to budget $325,000 each year in order to be on track. Last year we budgeted and put in 2 years worth into Fund 46, so we have 1 year of a wiggle room. But while we have the surplus, it's recommended that we put in that $325,000 this year and use that buffer in a future year when we might be in a more precarious situation in terms of budget. And then what we can do strategically to utilize additional remaining surplus this year for next year's budget is transfer funds to Fund 38. So I put a little graph together that kind of shows what that might look like, but essentially what it does is it frees up that same amount that we transfer to Fund 38 in Fund 10 next year to free up those funds for our general operational purchases. So this graph explains why transfer to Fund 38 would free up those dollars in Fund 10 next year. So this is a graph of our levy. So say our levy is about $50 million. If we have $3 million in Fund 38 expenses, we have to take the first $3 million off the top of that 50 million. So now we can only levy 47 million into Fund 10. That 3 million has to go into Fund 38 for our debt payments. If we take that $3 million from this year's budget and transfer to Fund 38 for next year, we don't have to take 3 million off the top of next year's levy to put into Fund 38 because we already fulfilled that via the transfer this year. Instead, we can take that full 50 million and use it for Fund 10. So strategically, if we had a surplus, we could transfer it to Fund 38 at the end of the year and use it to not have to pay $3 million within the budget next year for Fund 38 for debt expenses. So looking at next year, these are projected implications at this time from COVID. So we anticipate a reduced revenue from the state of $600,000. And again, with the new information as of a couple days ago, we're hearing that that could be much worse, but we just don't have any sense of solid numbers at this point. So, and if I had learned that maybe a week or two ago, I probably would have updated this, but that was new information as of Friday afternoon. So that's why this still says $600,000. I think that we should start planning for reduced revenue even beyond that. And as soon as we have more information from the state, we will absolutely share that with the team. So additional technology costs, we know that with having devices in student homes for months on end, that we're going to have additional repairs and damages and probably even lost devices than we typically have on any normal year. We have compensatory services and or extended school year. So that's when IEPs aren't met throughout the year. We have to make up those services, and generally that means we have to use consultants, which are very expensive, much more than a normal staff would be. And then we know that with such a weird year, we have to prioritize the social emotional support of our staff and students. So where this might not have been a priority in terms of a budget on a regular year, we might have to have additional staff or whatever that looks like to support our school community for next year. And then with this current projection as written right here with this $600,000 revenue reduced from the state, that CARES revenue that we talked about earlier, that 1.4 roughly million dollars from the feds would cover this. So it's not all bleak, but we do know now that we're probably going to have to budget for reduced revenue beyond that 600,000. And what that means is that just like in prior years, we have to prioritize. So really we have to look at our big picture items. We have a teacher computer refresh next year that was planned. We have already put that on hold. We know that we have curriculum adoption coming up. Compensation is a huge piece of our expenses each year. We have employee benefits. We have retirement benefits. So we're going to be looking at the various ways that we can make our budget balanced next year and via prioritizing some of these items. So budget projections, if we anticipate COVID implications are awash with new federal revenue, which at this point we probably should anticipate more expenses than we have revenue, so it's not quite a wash, we would have a deficit of 2.5 million. And then if we incorporate an additional million in additional employee compensation, that means next year's budget projection right now is about 3.5 million is a deficit that we have to balance. And just a note that the proposed compensation model analysis is still in progress. So that $1 million is right now a rough estimate if what that new model, that draft model might look like. It's just an estimate at this point. So if we can transfer 2 million, so earlier we talked about transferring 500,000 to fund balance and 325,000 to fund 46. Conservatively, that will leave us with about a $2 million budget surplus to fund 38 for future unknown COVID implications. So there's a few different strategies we can take in balancing next year's budget. If we say our deficit is going to be roughly 3.5 million and our remaining surplus after we budget 500,000 into fund balance and 325 into fund 46 for the turf field replacement plan, we're left with about somewhere between a $2 million and a $4 million remaining surplus. So we have some options. We can utilize that surplus entirely. We can reduce costs by 3.5 million, or we can do a combination of both. And what our job now is to monitor the impacts of COVID on our budget. So we will hear, we're on the lookout from the state of what the new state factors will be, or at least the recommendations to use within our budgets, and then work through scenarios similar to what we did last year. So we used priorities from our board and went through what changes we could make within our expense budget to make sure that our revenues and expenses balance. Another option is we could not have a balanced budget, which would mean we would use fund balance. However, we know that our goal has been to grow fund balance and have a balanced budget moving forward. So those are some of our to-do list items. And then also we know that we need to maintain commitment to well-being of staff and students, especially through this difficult time. And we know that transitioning back to school is not going to be normal, like going from regular summer back into school, because we've had this odd time, and we need to make sure we're supporting the well-being of our staff and students through that transition back to normalcy, whenever that happens. And so we don't have these scenarios yet. That's what we're working on as we hear more from the state. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now, waiting to see what we hear from the state in terms of the potential impacts on our budget. We do know that the longer COVID keeps businesses closed, the less, the more heavily that this will impact our revenue going forward. And we can also probably plan on it not just impacting next year's revenue, but future budgets as well. And then just finally going into a projected mill rate. Our mill rate right now is projected for next year, projected to be somewhere between $8.30 to about $8.49. I mean, what's important here is that we remember that it's been dropping. So in 2019, this year, it's 924, and last year was 954. And we know that that people don't remember when it drops, but everybody remembers when it goes up. So we do anticipate that it'll probably steady off somewhere around the $8 mark, maybe even a little bit lower, due to there's just a number of factors that go into projected mill rate. But at some point it could go back up, and it's just important to know that it's not always going to be at this low amount, and it has been dropping, and we have seen it fluctuate over the years. You can see in that graph. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, just many unknowns. It's not super fun to talk through a budget when there's just a lot of things up in the air. But we are doing what we can in terms of our direct team of directors is talking through on Wednesday at our weekly meeting what actions we need to be taking in terms of hiring. Deidre talked about one of the positions within our schools that we haven't posted just yet. We're just pausing on that. So we're talking through what exactly we need to be doing moving forward to put ourselves in the best situation for next year's budget. We know that the more flexibility we have, the better off we're going to be in being able to come up with the best solution for us.
Thanks, Caitlin. I was actually holding off on questions until you were done.
Okay.
So that was the last slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Noah, go first, and then Kristen.
First, for summer school, you mentioned about virtual learning. That hasn't been put in stone, right? We could still possibly hold regular summer school.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. We don't know yet what could happen with summer school. I think right now schools are not able to meet until June 30th, but anybody correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the last time we heard from the state, is June 30th is what schools are going to be closed through as of what we know right now. But we do know today that Governor Evers relaxed some of those safer at home regulations, so that could change. But yes, we're preparing for a virtual summer school option should that be the case.
Yeah, no, we've been advised to plan for it as if it's on, as if it is virtual at this point. And that's as much guidance as we've been given.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss something.
Yeah, and we typically start summer school in June for secondary. So we try to catch kids right away. So we would be within that June 30 window unless that changes.
I had another unrelated question. So I saw the 500,000 for the budget to put into fund balance. Is that in addition to what we had already budgeted to put in the fund balance, or is that the budgeted amount?
This is the budgeted amount.
Okay. What is our projected, or it should be known, right? Fund 38, what we will need to pay for Fund 38 for next year?
I believe it's about 3 million.
Okay. And then the last question I had was, we talked about using the 1.4 million projected amount addition for Title I funds from the feds that we were going to get. Is all the things that you mentioned, can that all be used within Title I?
So good question. Okay, so this is a clarification point I need to make, is that the money, the 1.4 million, isn't to be used with Title I regulations. They just use the Title I formula to figure out how much districts are going to be receiving. So that's a good distinction point. So far, we just know that it has to be spent on students in some way or another. I don't know more specifics than that, but it doesn't have to be spent like our regular Title I funds are. That's just the formula, excuse me, just the formula that they used.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Caitlin, how often are you getting updates from the state or from any other organizations? Is it daily, weekly? I mean, obviously this is a very fluid situation, so like how often are you kind of revisiting everything? Because if you do it too much, you're going to go crazy too. So I mean, seriously, like what kind of time frame are you updating everything?
So I would say throughout March, like since we closed, probably those 2 weeks, it was like daily. It was hard to even keep up. And now that it's been, when Safer at Home was in place, it was kind of a lull. And then we got the negative, or the worst case scenario of a decrease of $50. And that was the last time we heard something in terms of budget factors to use that were recommended. And that was maybe 3 weeks ago. And then this phone call that I had on Friday, where the WASBO, the business manager director from the state, he was on the call and mentioned that these were some new things being talked about, that we should start budgeting for less than $50 or a greater than $50 decrease for next year, and said that within the next 2 weeks, hopefully that there's more specifics. So I would say within 2 weeks, that's what I'm just reiterating what I've been hearing. But DPI did say in a phone call, I think it was a week or two ago, that any numbers that are being used at this point are purely speculation. Nobody quite knows just yet.
Right, makes sense. No, you had another question?
Yeah, with the court case that's pending at the state level right now, if for some reason the Supreme Court upholds the Republicans' challenge and forces the release of the Safer at Home, how could that possibly impact these numbers?
I'm gonna have to just say that everything is up in the air right now. I can't say for certain how it would or wouldn't impact, because even these numbers are speculation. So I just think that based on what we know about how the state is funded, that the sooner we get back to a normal, whatever that normal looks like, and income tax is being brought into the state, and sales tax is being brought into the state, and gas tax is being brought into the state, the sooner that happens, the sooner we'll know some more answers on how this will affect us.
That would conceivably increase our costs right now. So the surplus of 3 to 5 million that's estimated, I presume, would be less.
Yep. That's based on us not returning to school.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's busing costs. We'd have to all reactivate all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And Noah, just so you and the rest of the board also knows, Marty and I both follow a ton of what's happening kind of state by state as well, and WASBO will give you updates as to state by state. In most of the states, even when the Safer at Home orders aren't as tight or aren't as restricted, the schools have remained closed. That's kind of been the pattern so far. Not that that will definitely be the pattern in Wisconsin, but even states that don't have a very tight as tight of a stay for at home order as we've had in Wisconsin, where it doesn't go as long, many of those states have still kept schools closed for the remainder of the school year. I think some of the question would be about summer school as far as what could potentially change about that, but that's kind of been the trend so far.
Gary, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. So if we put an additional 325,000 in Fund 46, what would that bring our total to?
I'd have to look that up and get back to you. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but it would just keep us, on track plus 1 year of buffer.
Okay.
So essentially 1 year ahead, which could mean next year or the year after we don't have to contribute 325 to Fund 46 to stay on track, or we don't in future years and we just push back our field turf replacement plan by a year or 2 years or whatever it might be.
And then I do have one more question. So this where you have the roughly 600,000 less revenue, what math is used to get to that number?
Good question. Okay, so what that is in our budget model system, in the software, we currently plug in for next year $179 increase on top of this year. So what we plug in instead is a $50 decrease from this year's per pupil dollar. And then we look at the output and it shows, I just have to do the math of, I plug in 179 and look at the output and it shows, say, 3.7 million, or say 3.1 million deficit. And then I go in and plug in negative $50 instead of plus 179, and then it shows a $3.7 million deficit. So that's how we get that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And every time I plug in a number, I just close my eyes and then hit enter and see what the.
It's red either way.
It's red. It's like, how red is it going to be?
Noah.
Does that take into account the possibility of being able to count 4K students as full students? I believe that was a legislation model or projected that House do.
No, this one keeps 4K at 0.6, not 1.0 FTE.
Okay.
You guys are really testing me on this budget model.
It's tough work. I mean, you talk about the CARES Act, that's my world, and they're on version 3 already, so it's changing on a daily basis at the federal level as well. So I don't envy you updating this on a regular basis because it is so fluid.
Yes, it is. It's very fluid, and that's what it makes it hard to, even put together a presentation that's not confusing. I tried to make it so it's like kind of flow, and then I felt really good about it, and then on Friday on this call and I was like, well, gosh darn it, no.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Is the budget model still the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, it's a spreadsheet of tons of macros and formulas and such. It's the most complex spreadsheet I've seen. Yes.
Yeah, it's 2020 and you're still using an Excel spreadsheet.
Yes.
And I work for the agency that put that together, so.
Scary.
So Caitlin, if you can continue to give us updates, obviously, as you have them, board updates, things like that, and obviously we'll stick to the same schedule for the tax levy and the proposed budget as we've already approved. So we know this is going to continue to come forward, and we'll probably change 18 times between now and the next time you present to us. And if there's anything, obviously, that's completely upends everything, then we'll lean to you for some guidance and for some communication on your behalf. So, do we have any other questions for Caitlin?
Just one comment for Caitlin. I'm so glad I don't have your job.
Thank you,
Because I
Jack.
can't imagine what it's like to sit down and turn on your computer, go, okay, what surprises do we get today?
We should have a board exercise where every member of the board has to. We should have a board exercise. Every member of the board has to work in the spreadsheet.
I could do that.
I could do that.
Careful what you ask for. I was just gonna say, I had to do it for class, Gary, and I'm with you. Like, it is complicated, and certainly I do not envy that side of the work. So we're lucky we have Caitlin who does a good job with it.
I don't even like balancing my checkbook.
Caitlin, could you unshare the?
Oh, sorry, yes. I will try. Let's see here.
Perfect. Great.
Okay.
Any other questions for Caitlin? If not, we will take a 5-minute break to take down and get ready and come back, get the new link for, and then take a motion for executive session. So we'll take a quick 5-minute recess.
Now, we have to go onto another site, correct?
That's correct. So the link was sent out by Suzette in email.
Yep.
So you log off of this one and then log back onto that one.
Sounds good.
All right, see everybody on the other side.
So now we will do a roll call to go into open.
Ms. Klug? Yes. Mr. Schultz? Ms. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Ustra?
Yes.
Mrs. Jester? Mr. Sickett? Mr. Keller?
Yes.
President Adam?
Yes. All right, so the item on the agenda is to move, we'd have a motion on the table to approve the diploma as requested in closed session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Congratulations, Ali. Congratulations. We're very proud of you.
Virtual high five.
Giving you high fives. Yep, go for it. All right, so now we need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, ready to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, stay safe, everybody. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you all.